Have you ever looked at a woman who lives alone, no boyfriend, no partner, not even casually dating, and wondered, why? The answer most people jump to is loneliness. Or maybe heartbreak. Some even assume she just hasn't met the right person yet. But none of those are quite right. The real answer is something a lot more uncomfortable. Something that quietly challenges everything we've been taught about womanhood, connection, and identity. Because when a woman chooses to be alone, she's not giving up. She's not hiding. She's not lost. She's discovering. And that kind of self-discovery, it doesn't come with applause. It doesn't rack up likes. It doesn't arrive wrapped in flowers or sealed with a kiss. It comes in the form of silence, of depth, of strength most people never get the chance or have the courage to tap into. See, she's not lonely. She's selective. She's not cold. She's just tired. Tired of setting herself on fire to keep others warm. Tired of offering love to people who only ever wanted her light, not her soul. There's something deeply unsettling to the world about a woman who doesn't need a relationship to feel whole. Because that shatters the myth. The myth that women are emotionally dependent. That they need saving. That without a man, they're incomplete. But what happens when a woman no longer believes that? What happens when she stops searching outward and starts going inward? Carl Jung once said, "Everything we deny in ourselves becomes part of our shadow." And that's exactly what these women, these unapologetically single women, are confronting. Not just their own shadows, but the collective shadow of a society that's still uncomfortable with female independence. They are the embodiment of a path less traveled. They are who many dream of becoming but few dare to be. They don't shout to be heard. They whisper truth through their choices. They're not trying to attract attention. They've retreated, not out of fear, but out of preservation. They're not interested in chasing fairy tales. They're creating peace. And that makes people uneasy. Because in a world that glorifies urgency, being alone is seen as a problem to solve. But these women, they've realized that the deepest love doesn't come from chasing. It comes from stillness. The woman who lives alone without a boyfriend isn't broken. She's operating on another frequency. A place where nothing is begged for, it's chosen. A place where approval isn't a currency, it's irrelevant. A place where being present in her own life is enough. And maybe that's why she draws so much criticism. Why people project onto her. Why they try to explain her choices like she's an unsolved mystery. But what most people don't see is this: her absence isn't emptiness. It's presence. Powerful, whole, radiant presence. She's not rejecting love. She's just no longer interested in the kind of love that shrinks her. And until the real thing comes along, she stands. Strong. Self-sufficient. Complete. Maybe you're watching this and thinking, that sounds like pride. Or, that's just emotional baggage talking. But pause. Take a breath. Way down, somewhere beneath all the noise and conditioning, there's a quiet voice inside you. A question that doesn't leave. What if that silent path is the only path that leads to the kind of love that actually matters? The love that begins with you. Because the silence that surrounds a woman who lives alone isn't a void. It's a sanctuary. But here's the thing. Most people don't know what to do with that. They label her cold, distant, arrogant. But she didn't build that space to keep people out. She built it to protect herself from losing herself. Again, Jung also said, everything we don't face in ourselves, we project onto others. And maybe that's why solitude still gets confused with sadness. Why people think being alone equals being unloved. But for her, being alone was the gateway to wholeness. While others sought validation through relationships, she turned inward. She looked herself in the eye. And she didn't flinch. She faced the memories that haunted her. The pain she'd tucked away. The relationships that looked like love but felt like abandonment. She faced it all. Her decision to be alone didn't come from a fresh wound, it came from a scar. A healed one. One that taught her what love is not. She hasn't given up on love. She's just done accepting anything that makes her feel small. This woman knows pain. She's loved until it hurt. Given until she was empty. Begged for crumbs no one should ever have to ask for. But at some point, something inside her shifted. And no, it wasn't a dramatic awakening. It wasn't a lightning bolt. It was a slow, quiet series of disappointments. Disappointments that stopped breaking her and started teaching her. And what you see now, that calm, that distance, that seeming coldness, that's emotional maturity. And maturity, it's terrifying. It's presence. It's clarity. It's a refusal to play games. She no longer wants promises. She wants presence. She doesn't crave being pursued. She craves being seen. And being truly seen? That takes more than flowers and fancy words. It takes depth. It takes courage. It takes someone willing to meet her in the dark and not flinch at what they find. That's why she feels unreachable to so many. Not because she's difficult. Because she's whole. And when a woman becomes whole, she activates something deep in the collective unconscious. She awakens two reactions in the world, admiration and fear. Admiration from those who are also seeking truth. Fear from those still living in pieces, waiting for someone else to complete them. She doesn't want to complete anyone. She wants to overflow. And she knows that kind of union can't happen until both people have faced themselves. So she waits. Not out of stubbornness, not out of pride, but out of loyalty to her own soul. She's not hiding. She's preserving. There's a difference. But we live in a world that doesn't really understand that. A world that still clings to the fairy tale ending, happily ever after, wrapped in a couple's photo, plastered on social media. A world that sees being single as failure. But as Jung said, where convention rules, there is little room for authenticity. And this woman, she doesn't live by convention. She lives by essence. She hears things like, "You're too picky," or "You're being unrealistic," and she smiles. That quiet, knowing smile. The kind of smile that doesn't argue because it doesn't need to. Because what they call picky, that's her bare minimum. She spent years learning what she truly deserves. And now, she's not interested in settling for less, just to make others more comfortable. She's not looking for perfect. She's looking for someone who's done the work. Someone who's looked at their own shadow the way she has. Someone who knows how to love deeply, without needing to possess, control, or fix. And let's be honest, that kind of person? You don't meet them on just any street corner. So she waits. And while she waits, she's not wasting time. She's growing, healing, becoming. Because she knows, real love never demands that you lose yourself. It begins where you find yourself. What makes her so hard to understand, so hard to label, isn't just her independence. It's her peace. That unsettling, almost disarming calm that radiates from someone who has finally made peace with their own company. Because in a world addicted to speed, to stimulation, to constant connection, she chooses depth, stillness, truth. She doesn't run from silence, she lives in it. And from that silence, she's built a new kind of strength. Not the loud, performative kind, but the quiet, grounded strength of someone who no longer needs to prove her worth to anyone. And that's terrifying to people. Especially to those who are still desperately chasing validation. To those who only feel seen when someone else is looking. She doesn't play those games anymore. Not because she's better than anyone, but because she's been there. She's exhausted herself trying to be enough. She's shaped herself into who others wanted her to be. She's whispered her needs, hoping someone might finally hear them. And when no one did, she heard them herself. That's the moment everything changed. Now, when she says no, it's not a strategy. It's not a punishment. It's not a negotiation tactic. It's the truth. When she walks away, it's not for attention. It's not manipulation. It's self-respect in motion. When she chooses to stay home instead of spending the evening with someone who makes her feel invisible, it's not pride. It's clarity. Clarity she earned the hard way. Through grief. Through longing. Through sitting with herself in the raw aftermath of yet another almost love that never saw her fully. That kind of clarity doesn't shout. It doesn't argue. It just is. And that, right there, is what makes her dangerous to the system. To the social script that says a woman's happiness must be tied to her relationship status. To the belief that says her value is something given, not something owned. But she's flipped the narrative. She's no longer seeking to please. She's simply choosing to be. And in doing so, she's shaking something loose, something ancient. Something buried under centuries of conditioning and quiet compliance. Because it's not her solitude that unsettles people most. It's the peace she's found inside of it. Carl Jung once said, "Those who look outward, dream. Those who look inward, awaken." And she has awakened. She's gone inward. She's walked through the fire of her own patterns, her own wounds, her own shadows. She's unraveled herself. Questioned everything. Rebuilt everything. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't linear. It wasn't something you could post about with a caption and a cute filter. It was hard. But it was hers. And now she no longer defines herself by what others think. She no longer uses the gaze of others as her mirror. She sees herself clearly, unapologetically, and that changes everything. How many times have you caught yourself wondering if being alone means something is wrong with you? How often have you felt the need to explain yourself? To justify your aloneness in a world that idolizes couples, even the unhappy ones? She's been there too. She used to think there was something broken in her. That's what they all said, right? You're too much. You're too picky. You just haven't met the right guy. But one day, she realized something that changed everything. It's better to be alone than to be invisible in a relationship. And from that day forward, she made a silent vow. A promise to herself. Never again would she shrink for someone else's comfort. Never again would she settle just to feel chosen. Her path hasn't been perfect. There are still days of doubt. Moments of longing. Nights that echo with old loneliness. But there's also strength, so much strength, in the choices she now makes. Because every step she takes is rooted in awareness. Every decision, a declaration, I will not abandon myself again. She's learned what real love is. It doesn't suffocate. It doesn't manipulate. It doesn't require sacrifice of the self. Real love liberates. It adds. It supports without consuming. And until she finds that kind of love, if she finds it, she'll keep choosing to grow. Alone. Not out of pride, but out of integrity. Because she knows, the woman she's becoming deserves nothing less. She is the living, breathing embodiment of Jung's individuation. That slow, sacred process of becoming whole. Of meeting your own shadow. Of descending into your own unconscious, and emerging not as someone new, but as someone more true. She doesn't need someone to complete her. She wants someone who can stand beside her, fully formed. That's not arrogance. That's awareness. And sadly, that kind of awareness is still rare. Most people love from their wounds, from their need, from their fear. But she wants to love from wholeness. And if she walks alone today, it's because every step echoes with the lessons she's fought to learn. Every no she gives is an act of self-honoring. Every boundary she draws is a reminder. Real love doesn't require begging. She no longer needs to explain herself. She no longer needs to prove her worth. Because the woman who once begged to be loved, she no longer exists. Something in her broke. And it was that break, the one she thought would destroy her, that finally set her free. Because sometimes, the only way the soul finds its new shape is through collapse. Carl Jung once wrote, "The tree that grows to heaven must also have roots that reach down to hell." And she's lived that truth. She descended into the hell of her own story. She faced inherited pain, ancestral wounds. She bore the weight of generations of women who taught her to settle, to serve, to stay small. But she broke the cycle. She said no. No to repeating the same emotional scripts. No to relationships that looked safe but felt like cages. No to the quiet desperation of loving someone who never truly saw her. It wasn't her job to fix anyone, to carry anyone, to lose herself so someone else could feel whole. And when she stopped accepting less, the world pushed back. "You're too harsh. You'll end up alone. You expect too much." But she stood firm. First in doubt, then in clarity, and finally, in power. Because once you've been to your own abyss, you stop fearing absence. You stop fearing silence. You stop fearing being misunderstood. She learned to nourish herself with solitude, to warm herself with her own fire. She's not unreachable. She just refuses to be invaded. There's a huge difference between opening your heart and allowing someone to tear it apart. She still opens, yes, but only to those who come with truth. Not sweet talk, not performances. Truth. Her intuition has become sharp. Her presence is her filter. She can feel from across a room whether someone carries depth or just wants access. And when it's the latter, she walks away. No explanation. No regret. Because her transformation is more than just healing. It's archetypal. It's ancestral. It's revolutionary. It's the memory buried deep in every woman. We were not born to be chosen. We were born to choose. And now that she remembers, there's no turning back. This woman, the one who lives alone, who seems untouchable, who moves through the world with a grace people don't know how to name, she's not performing strength. She is strength. And it's not the kind of strength that flexes. It's not loud, not aggressive, not armored. It's the kind that's rooted, quiet, deep. The kind you don't notice until it's standing in front of you, and you suddenly feel your own noise reflected back. She's not here to impress. She's not here to prove. She's not here to compete for love like it's a prize someone else gets to give her. Because somewhere along the way, she stopped asking, "Am I enough for them?" and started asking, "Are they enough for the life I'm building?" That shift, it changed everything. She doesn't crave a spotlight. She craves presence. The real kind. The kind that listens. That holds space. That doesn't flinch when she shows up raw, unfiltered, human. She's not waiting to be rescued. She's not dreaming of a savior. She's already saved herself. So no, she's not cold. She's not distant. She's not bitter. She's clear. And that clarity is intimidating. Because the world is still used to women who dim themselves, who shrink, who apologize before they speak, who wait for permission to take up space. But she doesn't wait anymore. She chooses. She chooses herself, again and again and again. And when a woman learns to choose herself that fiercely, everything she once tolerated becomes unbearable. She no longer entertains almosts. She no longer clings to maybes. She no longer accepts crumbs and tries to call it a meal. What she's building within herself is far too sacred for that. And that's what most people don't understand. They think she's difficult, that her standards are too high, that she's impossible to please. But it's not that she's hard to love. It's that she's done pretending that half love is love at all. She's tired of the performance, the filtered version of connection. The carefully curated image of romance that looks good in photos but feels empty in the silence. She wants something that feels real when no one is watching. And until that comes, she waits. Not out of fear, not out of anger, but out of trust. She trusts herself now, trusts her inner compass, trusts the rhythm of her own soul. And that trust, that's what makes her untouchable to those who haven't done the work. Because here's the truth most people avoid. Love isn't just about finding the right person. It's about being the right person for yourself first. That's what she's done. She's become the partner she used to look for. She holds herself when she breaks. She celebrates herself when she wins. She sits with her own pain without trying to escape it. She's become her own witness. And once you've experienced that level of intimacy with your own soul, anything less feels like betrayal. She no longer needs the world's approval. She no longer waits for someone to call her worthy, because she already knows. And that knowing, it's her power. She's no longer trying to be understood by everyone. She's speaking a language that only the soul can hear. The kind of language you don't learn through textbooks or quotes. You learn it through heartbreak, through silence, through rebuilding, through letting go. And most people aren't fluent in that. So they judge her, call her intimidating, too intense, too deep. But she's not too anything. She's just no longer willing to dilute herself. And yes, she still wants love, deeply, but not the kind that costs her peace. Not the kind that makes her smaller. Not the kind that demands she prove her worth just to be seen. She wants a love that expands her, that stands beside her, not above, not below. And until that love arrives, she'll keep walking her path. Even when it's hard. Even when it's lonely. Even when the world whispers that she's doing it all wrong. Because her soul knows the truth. Settling is not safety, it's self-betrayal. And she refuses to betray herself ever again. She's already done that. She's already bent, shaped, molded herself into versions that fit someone else's vision. She's already silenced her voice just to be chosen. She's already swallowed her needs in the name of keeping peace. And each time, she lost a piece of herself, until there were no more pieces to give. And that was the moment she woke up. She saw the pattern, saw the way she'd made herself small to make others feel big, saw how she'd mistaken love for control, attention for affection, tolerance for compatibility. And in that clarity, she said the most powerful word a woman can say. Enough. Since then, she's stopped chasing. She's stopped waiting. She's stopped editing her edges to be more palatable. Now she lives from the center of herself. Unapologetic. Aligned. Awake. And while that makes her a mystery to some, a threat to others, it makes her magnetic to those who are doing the same. Because wholeness recognizes wholeness. And wounds recognize wounds. So when someone tells her she's too much, she knows it's not about her. It's about their own unhealed parts colliding with her wholeness. She no longer takes it personally. She no longer needs to be liked by everyone, because she'd rather be respected by herself. And that, right there, is the revolution. She doesn't want someone to complete her. She wants someone to meet her, to see her, to stand beside her, not because they need her to heal them or validate them, but because they want to walk beside someone who's already done the inner work. That's rare. That's sacred. And she knows it. So she protects herself. Fiercely. Not from love, but from anything pretending to be love. And while the world still tries to convince her she's missing out, she knows. What she's cultivating within is more meaningful than any attention, any affection, any companionship that asks her to trade herself for connection. Because she's learned, real love doesn't require sacrifice of soul. It requires alignment. And she will wait for that. She will protect that. Because now, she knows what it took to become the woman she is. And she will never, ever, let anyone unmake her again. There's something about her that draws them in, something they can't quite define. It's not just the way she looks. It's not even the way she moves. It's deeper. It's her energy. There's a softness to her that doesn't beg. A warmth that doesn't chase. A glow that doesn't come from trying to be seen, but from being fully present in her own skin. It's her feminine energy. And for many men, especially those who've never known true intimacy, it's intoxicating, but also terrifying. Because she doesn't radiate the kind of femininity that's been tamed, shaped, or conditioned to please. Hers is wild, ancient, untouchable. The kind of feminine energy that reminds a man of what he's forgotten in himself. That's why they crave it. Not because she performs submission, but because she embodies freedom. She laughs without permission. She feels without shame. She expresses without filtering. She creates without apologizing. She exists, boldly, vividly, without asking if she's allowed. And that kind of feminine essence, it calls to something primal in a man. It calls him home. But here's the paradox. The very thing that draws him in is the thing he cannot own. Because she doesn't need him. She may want him, deeply, passionately, sincerely, but her life doesn't collapse without him. She's already full. She's not the missing puzzle piece. She is the whole picture. And for men who've been taught that power means dominance, that love means control, that masculinity means being needed, this is deeply unsettling. They don't know how to hold her. Not because she's too much, but because she's too free. She doesn't orbit around a man's attention. She doesn't mold herself to fit a fantasy. She doesn't ask, "What do I need to be so he'll stay?" Instead, she asks, "Who am I when I stop performing love and start being it?" This woman, she doesn't play games. She doesn't flirt to manipulate. She doesn't seduce to gain power. She doesn't withhold affection to test. Her love is sacred, not transactional. And when she gives it, it's because it flows, not because she's trying to earn something in return. Men who haven't done the inner work don't know what to do with that. They expect her to need validation. They expect her to chase. They expect her to fold herself into their lives like a supporting role. But she's not a side character. She's the whole damn story. And until a man can meet her as an equal, not a controller, he'll feel both enchanted by her and unworthy of her. Because this kind of feminine energy, it doesn't tolerate disrespect. It doesn't reward inconsistency. It doesn't confuse desire with devotion. She sees through men, not in a way that shames them, but in a way that awakens them. She reflects back their own unmet potential, their buried emotions, their forgotten tenderness. She challenges the parts of them that were told to be stoic, invulnerable, hard. And for the ones ready to evolve, ready to rise into integrated, conscious masculinity, she's a mirror. But for those still rooted in ego, she's a threat. Because she cannot be possessed. She cannot be conquered. She cannot be reduced to a role. She lives from her soul. And that soul refuses to shrink. Men will say, "She's intimidating." But what they mean is, she's sovereign. They'll say, "She's too emotional." But what they mean is, she feels more deeply than I'm willing to. They'll say, "She's too independent." But what they mean is, she doesn't need me to validate her existence. And yet, they'll keep coming back. Because the feminine isn't just desirable, it's healing. It reminds a man of everything he's disowned in himself. His intuition, his sensitivity, his softness, his heart. And when he's ready, truly ready, to stop controlling and start connecting, she becomes not just a woman he wants, but a woman he honors. Not because she demanded it, but because her energy made it impossible not to. She didn't yell, didn't fight, didn't prove. She simply was. And in that being, she taught him something no one ever had. That real feminine power doesn't need to shout. It just is. Soft, still, unmoving, and yet unshakable. She never expected to be saved. Not anymore. The girl she used to be, the one who once dreamed of love like it was oxygen, she's long gone. What's left now is a woman who has walked through fire, who has bled quietly in bathrooms, who has fallen apart in the silence of her own thoughts, and who rebuilt herself, alone. So when love finally comes, it's not as a rescue. It's not a grand arrival with violins and breathless confessions. It's quiet, subtle, real. There's no dramatic entrance, no obsession, no game. He doesn't storm her gates or demand her attention. He knocks, softly, and she doesn't open the door because she's lonely. She opens it because something inside her recognizes something inside him. He isn't intimidated by her solitude. He isn't confused by her boundaries. He doesn't see her independence as rejection. Because he's not looking for someone to make him feel powerful. He's already done that work himself. He doesn't need to dominate her. He just wants to see her. And for the first time, she lets herself be seen. Not because she needs to be, but because she finally feels safe. Safe to be soft again. Safe to put down the armor she's worn for too long. Safe to let someone close, not to complete her, but to witness her. He doesn't flinch at her depth. He doesn't shrink from her silence. He doesn't try to change her rhythm. He listens. He stays. He respects the temple she's built from pain and poetry and healing. And she doesn't melt for him. She unfolds, petal by petal, breath by breath. Not rushing, not hiding, just being. Because this time, she's not trying to impress. This time, she's not bending into a version of herself she hopes he'll love. This time, she shows up whole. And so does he. There's no addiction. No chaos disguised as passion. No high highs followed by low lows. It's steady. It's slow. It's real. He doesn't want to possess her fire. He wants to sit beside it. He doesn't need her to shrink so he can expand. He expands with her. And finally, after all the heartbreak, all the waiting, all the work, she understands something no fairy tale ever told her. The greatest love isn't about being rescued. It's about being met. Not in pieces, but in full. And she meets him, fully, with eyes wide open, with a heart that doesn't beg, but welcomes, with a soul that doesn't ache, but sings. Because this isn't love rooted in lack. It's not, you complete me. It's, we're both complete, and we choose to walk this path together. That's the difference. That's what makes it sacred. That's what makes it last. And maybe the world will never understand this kind of love. The kind that doesn't need grand gestures or social proof. The kind that doesn't perform, doesn't post, doesn't compete. But she understands it. And that's enough. Because she remembers what it felt like to sleep next to someone and feel alone. She remembers giving her body to people who didn't care for her soul. She remembers shrinking herself just to be chosen. And now, she'll never do that again. Not for anyone. Not even for love. Because she knows, any love that asks her to abandon herself isn't love at all. So when they walk together, her and this man who's done his own work, it's not because they need to. It's because they want to. They could walk alone just fine. But it's more beautiful to walk side by side. No one dragging. No one chasing. No one begging. Just two whole people, walking home to themselves, together. That's the love she was always meant for. The one she had to grow into. The one she had to bleed for. The one that could only arrive after she stopped waiting. And now that it's here, she doesn't grasp it. She receives it. With open palms. With quiet joy. With the dignity of someone who knows, she didn't settle for this. She rose for it. And so did he. That's why it works. That's why it lasts. Because this love wasn't built on loneliness. It was built on wholeness. And now, as she stands beside him, fierce, soft, radiant, she knows. She was never too much. She was just waiting for someone who could meet her there. And now, he has. They both have. Not to save. Not to fix. Not to fill a void. But to overflow. Together.